Hello and welcome to the Retopo stage of this 3D code overview. You might have noticed that my cupcake frosting looks a little bit different from the last time we left off, and that's because I was super not happy with how it turned out. If I'd have spent just a couple more minutes on it, I would have gotten something more like this, which is kind of more what I was going for. I wanted this sort of layered swirly coming outy bits, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I apologize that I left you with a pretty crappy result, but I've gone off recording, off whatever, and I've just fixed it up a bit using the exact same tools that we were using before. It's just a case of putting more time into it. Before we begin the retopo, there is something I forgot to mention. It was to do, I don't know if you remember, but with our base, when I was creating it using the gear tool, and I was talking about being in orthographic and lining up these sort of north, south, east, west points with the grid. And there's a good reason for that, which will come in the retopo room. But obviously that was just done by eyeballing it. And so now I do want to make sure that it is exactly symmetrical on the X and the Z. So we're dealing with 4 quarters. And so what I will do is, just with the symmetry enabled, there is a symmetrical copy down here. I believe also sim copy as well. That is, I don't think it's exactly the same as the symmetrical copy here, but I could be wrong. So let's say I turn off the symmetry and I put in a bump there. So let's see if this works. So because this quarter here was the last one I worked on, in theory, if I do that, okay, yeah, so it's the exact same as sim copy, so just forget what I was saying. If I control Z or Z, depending on where you're from. Now if I just hit the shift key here to smooth, and I just give this quarter here a little tap, this will make this area the last piece of geometry that I worked on. So now if I hit that button, now the symmetrical copy copies this one. But either way, now we know for sure that each quarter of these are the same. So we can go ahead and start doing a retopo. You should have a similar UI to this. I can't remember. Either way, this is the one you should probably have. It's simple. Your UV preview, which will come into play. Fox tree and retopo objects, and that's pretty much all you need. So I'll do this. I'm gonna name each of my retopo layers the exact same as my voxel layers, and this will play a big role when we come to do the baking in doing name correspondence. I'm just mentioning it now, but we will talk about that later. So we're on the base, and there's many ways that we can retopo this object. Let's hide these for starters, and I'll get rid of my symmetry. No, I'll keep symmetry planes. My favorite tool is the points and faces, although it has its flaws, and we may see a few. So I'll try to start with the points and faces, and I'll begin by just putting a point here. You may have noticed it's created 2 points. You can do something. So if I try to increase the mirror snapping, I'm not sure what kind of value I need, but okay, either way, so now I'm left with 1 point. And then I put a point here, and let's put a point there, a point there. And so let's put a quad in here, put a quad in there. And so that's one way we could be doing it, but I've just realized there's an even quicker way. So if I just clear my points and let me select these faces and just delete them. I've just realized that we know this is symmetrical, so we can swap over to radial symmetry. So we can do something like this. And so this will create, oopsie. Okay, so that's a lot faster. Let's see if it will continue to build. It will. Sometimes the points and faces tool gets a little bit stuck in that it doesn't see what you see, so it tries to create a face maybe somewhere else, or it doesn't think that it can create a face. It probably needs some work, but in any case, even though I haven't run into that issue now, when I do, I usually just swap over to a quads tool, and it's just a case of you select beginning point, and then you just tap and tap, and then from here you can choose which point to go to next. I'm just hovering with the cursor here, so I'm not tapping down, and it will snap to that and snap to that. And that's pretty much the base done. Alright, so that's the base nearly done. We just need to fix up this top bit. So we'll do this, and again I'm just going to cap it. But we don't, actually no. We don't need to go that far in, so we'll just do another collapse here, which will only work if I bring down my radial max. At the moment, if it thinks that I want to collapse all of these, that's it won't work, so it won't let you. So I need to halve my, not 18, I need to halve my radial symmetry, and I can do that. Okay, so we are going to have a bit of an issue here where we don't have any geometry, so we can do, hopping back to the points and faces tool again, it won't create the line across the symmetry plane, so we need to disable symmetry for now. And we'll just add these. I'm hitting escape to drop out of the tool. So if I were to, just as an example, if I were to create a split there and then release Control and Shift and come over here and hold Control and Shift, it thinks that I want to start over here. So normally I just hit escape to come out of that. And let me undo that because I don't need it. But yeah, I'm creating extra lines here because I know I'm going to need them for my UV map. Because we want to be splitting these into quarters, so we need to have geometry that will allow us to do that. We still have these left to fill in, and I suppose points and faces could work well for this. So we could do something like that, essentially by creating it the same way I created it above. Points and faces. Do that, and I'll cap it. Okay, so the same again. We will collapse by halving this. Okay, that's going to work much better. So now our geometry lines will go across. And again, I didn't want to do that with symmetry. I mean, it's fine to do it with symmetry, but it's not what I wanted to do. Oops. Looks like we might have a weld issue there. I'll fix that up in a bit. I think that's all of them. And I know that I wasn't creating them on the lines, they're sort of slightly off. So first of all, let me just make sure that that's another great thing about the points and faces tool. You can use it to weld verts with other verts. Okay, so now I'm going to hit this symmetrical copy here, and you'll see down here now it says perfect symmetry. So we know that this is perfectly symmetrical all the way across, so we're done with that. Time for the cake. As usual, there are a few ways to do this. You could just keep putting down geometry until you got to the middle and all the way around. I'm going to use a tool called strokes for this, just to lay down the initial bit. We know that we don't need to go too high because the frosting will eventually take over. So the cake. Oh, another thing, I do like to have the voxel layer selected of the one that I'm trying to retopologize, mainly because it also, each layer remembers the symmetry setting for itself, so it makes sense that if you have sculpted something with a particular symmetry, you'd probably want to retopo it the same way as well. So let's do strokes, and I'll come into an orthographic view for this for now. And I want to lay my first stroke slightly intersecting, so a bit like that. And I can hide the base now. It was only there for reference. In terms of level of detail, I'd rather not go too high. Also, I'll disable symmetry for now. It can cause some issues sometimes. Well, let's see if it does. I guess I'll risk that. Oh, so yeah, the reason my light is turning there is to turn the light you hold shift and click and drag in open space. But then similarly, to draw a straight line, you click first and then hold shift and drag. So sometimes I just hit them in the wrong order, and that's why my light moves. Do that. Let's see, where's the frosting? Unfortunately, if I think this is true, even if it's ghosted, I can't have the frosting layer visible when I draw my stroke, because yeah, as you can see, it draws my stroke around the frosting. So I'm just gonna keep sort of hiding and unhiding it to see if I've gone high enough. Although I imagine that's probably, yeah, no, that's enough. Okay, so let's see if the symmetry is going to break this. So I've just laid down some, well, these will be my loops, and I'm just going to put down one more line here as close as I can to the center. That was a bit iffy. And number of segments, so it will automatically create geometry all around here with the amount of segments that you specify. I'm not sure how the symmetry is going to affect this. I imagine we're going to need to undo. Yeah, we're definitely going to need to undo. So I was right. Disable symmetry. And let's see if 12 looks like enough. 12 looks fine. And they're close enough to the north-southeast points that we can actually just come along here, enable our symmetry now, and then hit this symmetrical copy. So it will just create symmetry. So that's the cake portion done. And now for the frosting. For the frosting, we're going to be doing something completely different. I'm going to be using one of 3D Coat's auto retopology tools. And they've just recently integrated a standalone tool called Instant Meshes, or something like that. Yeah, Instant Meshes. And so we are going to be using that. The auto one is, as you might expect, if you hit this, you put in your desired poly count, and then you click OK, and it will do it. Because this has some shapes that I kind of want to keep, I do care a bit about the topology of this object, but not enough to do it manually. What I'm going to do instead is use the manual mode. And I found, I'm not sure if it's a bug or not, but typically the number that you enter in here, what you end up with is actually close to twice that amount. So I've put in 200, which is really low, but I think I will get about 400 or something thereabouts. So you hit OK, it'll launch the instant meshes, which really annoyingly doesn't have the same orbiting key presses. I'm not sure what word to use. Basically, how you navigate 3D Coat is not the same as how you navigate this. Either way, you start by hitting solve, making sure that your target count is the same. Oh, actually, that makes sense. It's a vertex count, not a triangle count or a poly count. Oh, fair enough. So I have hit solve, and you can see this is what it has determined the flow of the polygons to be, which is actually really quite nice. There's a bit of a break here that I want to fix, so I'll use this comb tool, and I'm just going to draw the line across there. It will recalculate, and that's pretty nice. Now I'll come out of that, and I'm just going to have a quick look around again here. It sort of comes off down there. We can tidy that up a little bit. So now it's going all the way across. For the most part, this is it's a pretty intelligent solve. It seems to have gone back on itself a little bit there. So I'll leave that like that for now. So to get this into 3D code, you hit solve again at the bottom, and it shows you kind of what it's thinking about in terms of polygon distribution, which seems okay. Maybe we'll get some trouble at the top, but for now that's alright. Hit export mesh, extract mesh, and then I think you do have to hit save. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure if I close the window now, I lose my mesh, so I'll hit save, and now I'll close my window. And it just puts it straight into the Retopo room. I found these meshes, they often require a little bit of a tidy up, and that's mostly where I use the points and faces tool. You have to be careful about the triangulation of meshes. So we can see this face right here. If you were to just export that, it's probably, based on how it's looking now, it's probably put that vertex, that edge that way, which maybe you wouldn't want. Maybe you would want it to be this way, which I think I do. And similarly, it sort of has some areas where it just hasn't put in the triangulation, and it's always best to try and fix that yourself, just in case when you export it, it might try to do something like that, which is pretty ugly, and it can cause lots of issues with lighting in a game engine. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these wherever I see them. So there's a huge one here. You can see the sculpt underneath follows this shape, so it makes sense that the Retopo does something similar. Yeah, again, I find with this, no matter how many little things I fix up, there's always seemingly some that I forget. Occasionally I have had to rebuild some of the mesh, but at the same time, the amount of time that it's saved me by generating this as a base is just phenomenal. And yeah, it's mostly used when you don't particularly care about the topology of your object, even though it has that sort of flow map type thing. Flow map's probably the wrong word. The directional, flowy, squiggly stuff. The thing that made it draw these edge loops the way that it has, so even though it has that, still for the most part, it's not going to be as accurate as doing it yourself, but of course it's going to be 10 times quicker. And I'll do this one here, because I am going to want to remove these faces underneath. They are completely redundant. This area is pretty horrible. You're going to get some pretty nasty shadows from that. So let's see if we can... What's the best way to do this? I guess just something like this. And we'll push that down in there. The idea is I just want to smooth out this ramp a bit so that shadows won't catch it too harshly. Still not the best. We can help this a bit actually by doing something like that. Now this area here, it's a pretty nasty area. In fact, there's two of them. These are what you would call poles, I believe, where there's too many edges going to a single point. But for a static mesh, you really don't need to worry about those kind of things too much, at least. If it causes a lighting issue, then that's a problem, but I don't believe that will. So I'm going to fix up some of this. Oh, this area is pretty messed up. So I'm just going to remove some of these redundant faces. Something like that. And that should be all the faces underneath. Ones that I don't think we're ever going to see. I tell a lie, we will see. So I'm going to unhide. Basically with the cake on top now, I'll unhide any that I can see. Oh, including this one. I could just grab these words and push them down a bit. Let's hide the cake. But I think it's just easier to remove the outer ring selection here. And it should be fine. Make sure there's nothing on top selected. Occasionally it will ignore the fact that you're ignoring back faces. So always check before removing. Seem to have missed two. So that is that. Total of 744 triangles. It's not too shabby for a little cupcake. I'm probably going to continue just using the points and faces to clean up these bits here. It's worth noting that there is an add and split tool somewhere. Yeah, this one, the add split tool. I don't know why you would ever want to use it when it's inbuilt with the points and faces tool. You just have to hold Control and Shift. So yeah, I'm going to continue just tidying this up a little bit, and then in the next video we will be doing the UVs, which should be pretty quick. Maybe we'll do the UVs and the bake, otherwise it'll be a 5-minute video. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.